tonight is the moment that longtime viewers have been waiting 7 years for, John Cullen. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Jason. Pretty big moment.
Yeah.
Pretty momentous occasion. 5 years ago, you and I flew back from Thailand.
Right. Yeah. And we're going to have, during the sponsor exclusive segment, which people are going to be able to join us for in just about 25 minutes on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and Subscribestar and Patreon/crowdsourcethetruth. We're going to have an historic, it's kind of like a travelogue and a documentary rolled into one, John, but this thing has been percolating for 5 years. And I'll tell you what, in putting it together and going over all the material, it brings back a lot. And
well,
in
tell
certain
people
regards,
what people don't know what it is. So there's people watching who are like, what the hell is he talking about?
Or maybe you should tell everybody.
All right. So the reason this show is kind of important and monumental, there's a couple reasons. 5 years ago, Jason was in the midst of lawfare. Lo and behold, right? By surprise, right? So, and I said to Jason, I got in touch with him. We were doing shows every 3 or 4 months together. We did that, whatever that nitwit's name. We did that big debacle thing with him. Yeah, Jake Morphonius. So we do all that stuff. And I got in touch with Jason, I guess with email or something. And I said, listen, I'm going to be leaving Thailand. That's kind of a secret, but I'm wrapping it up here. So, at the time I just got divorced and all that. So I said to Jason, if you want to see where I did all this stuff, you want to see my office, you want to see sort of where I was on the beach talking to Shepard and Bella, so you want to see where I was on the beach the first time I was talking to Laura Loomer, stuff like that, I'll come and I'll show you everything. Because this Jake guy was accusing me of being a CIA operation, right? Some op type thing, and you did it. You said, listen, I'm in the midst of some lawfare, but if you can wait 2-3 weeks, I'll do it. And you spent
counter lawfare is what I was in the midst of. They were doing lawfare to me.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, you were on the receiving end. So you flew to Bangkok and called a phone number I gave you and didn't know your ultimate destination. And when you got to Bangkok, right, you called that number and I picked up and said, here's what you're going to do.
This is in the documentary, actually. And I think you're going to love it because, you haven't seen a lot of this stuff. You weren't shooting it, so you don't know exactly what I was doing.
What are you kidding?
But the documentary, it takes everybody from, Hong Kong airport through this mysterious where the hell am I going to I meet you for the first time, and we're just immediately we drive around the island. The reason why I say it's a combination of a travelogue and a documentary is that it's an hour and 45 minutes in length, so people should start popping the popcorn now and hunker down. They're going to be able to watch it on the sponsor exclusive channels, and it'll be there later and tomorrow for everybody to watch. But it literally takes you on a tour of the island as John lays out not so much the details of the Las Vegas shooting, although that is very heavily covered throughout. It's more of your personal story as you were discovering this stuff. And then we do touch on this video here with Jake Morphonios, which this was incredibly underhanded of him. And at the time that he did it, I think he thought he was getting over on us because, he had a very large channel at the time, big following, couple 100,000 on YouTube. And when he did his Vegas reporting, he crossed over into the mainstream. I think USA Today was reporting on the fact that his channel got shut down. Now, you hadn't revealed yourself at all. You were using this avatar of the actual John Cullen, who is the guy who had spotted Nazis on the beach. And you were using that avatar until you were contacted by members of his family who asked you not to. And then, in part, as a result of this trip to Thailand that people are going to basically be able to join us on in 25 minutes, you decided to start appearing on video and doing regular shows. This was a big step, I think, towards establishing trust between you and I. I was like, well, you know what? I don't know who this guy is. Maybe I show up in Thailand and I get thrown in a van and murdered, but whatever. I'll just try it. And you had to feel the same way about me. We did not know. It was it's like that trust game where you fall over backwards and the people catch you or don't. You caught. Thank you.
But we did enough of these shows together, and your interest to me seemed genuine. Like you were genuinely inquisitive, in particular about the Frank Muth stuff, the OPM sang stuff, right, and all that. And to me, it's like that's the normal reaction. Is like somebody watches the video and goes, "What?
Yeah.
What?" It's like, huh? Are you kidding me? So that's like the right reaction. And the fact that you were doing what you were doing, and that at that time, I don't think you were up to the 120,000, but you might have had 75, 80,000 subscribers at that time or something like that. You were at a big number, 65, 85. I mean, you were in bigger numbers.
We were getting lots of views. Now. We used to do videos, 10,000, 25,000, right.
Yeah, 30,000, 50,000. We were getting serious numbers. So I just figured, again, I'm much more naive, right? So tonight I'll be taking off the disguise and you guys will get to see that I actually am kind of part retarded. So I'm very naive,
You're not
right?
supposed to say that.
Well, it's okay. I got 2 retarded kids, so it's fine. It runs in the family. So the whole point here is that I'm very naive. I'm like, if you're at one end of the spectrum with people like Jason barks at everybody, so to speak, I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I trust everybody. I just assume everybody's good until I see evidence of, the weasel activity, the bad stuff. So it's just a naive thing. And I think it comes with the Asperger's. I think people with Asperger's tend to.
I would argue that it's a normal thing for a trustworthy person to presume that other people are trustworthy. And the barking at everybody is something that has definitely evolved. I mean, it was in my nature, but I was obviously a little bit too trusting. Certainly, we've been doing an entire series, Web of Deception. And what's interesting, John, is that even though you hadn't conceived of that series at the time that I went to see you in Thailand, I don't even know if you were aware of George and all the maniacs that were after me, but we touch on stuff in this documentary that people are going to see at 8 p.m. on the sponsor exclusive segment. We touch on this Web of Deception type stuff. What I'd like to do is show just a little bit of this Jake Morphonius thing that we got into, because this was early in our, let's just take a look at this.
In intelligence agencies, they think we're stupid idiots. They think we're too dumb to understand. Problem is, I'm a history major and I know who John Cullen is, and I'm going to tell you. At best, John Cullen was a bumbling fool. He was a teenager. Yes, he was in the Coast Guard, but he was a young guy. He bumbled his way into something that he clearly didn't understand. He goes out onto the beach. There's these Nazis coming on the beach, and he offers to give them a warm place to stay for the night. He didn't know these guys were Nazis. It was the head of this group that landed, a former U.S. Army officer named George Dosh. He is the hero here, not John Cullen. Dosh had lived in the United States for 19 years. He went home to Germany before World War II because his mother was there, his family was there, she was sick, so he went home there. While he was there, the Nazis tried to recruit him to be part of a saboteur team. They were going to blow up some American aluminum plants supplying
people
weapons.
Can go back on Odyssey and check this out, but it's just, even in this short segment, it's interesting to observe. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but as far as I understand, you just saw, this guy discovered Nazis on the beach. Jake goes into the whole history. It's like, who even knows all this stuff? I mean, great, he's a history major, but he did that just to be able to bust on you during this interview. And what was disgraceful here is that he falsely claimed, well, only one of the things he did that was disgraceful. He falsely claimed that I had conspired with him to create a Jerry Springer type show where, we would, falsely lure him or you or somebody into some kind of thing. People now know from Crowdsource the Truth being around 7 years, I don't do that. There have been times that jackasses have come on the show and gotten yelled at, but I don't plan that. I said to you and to him, why don't we get you two guys together, because you've got this disparate research, and I think just debating it and everything, Leah's okay, debating it and everything would be helpful and help us both learn. As you said earlier, this was my natural inquisitiveness. I observed that both of you were doing interesting work, but it was not really super aligned. And what happens if we put you guys together and get you talking? He's the one who planned to deceive everybody, and he tried to say that you weren't in Thailand. What was the deal with him later admitting that he knew you were in Thailand and just made that up? And how is that a legitimate way to operate?
Well, I think at one point when we had him on the phone, he said, I know he's not in Thailand. He started asking, what color are the buses in Bangkok? And I don't take buses in Bangkok, so I'm not a bus riding kind of guy. So I didn't know the color of the buses in Bangkok. It's not really something I was paying attention to, kind of like the gorilla illusion. Not something I look at. But I put him on the phone with my stepdaughter, right? So at the time I was married. And I put him on the phone with my stepdaughter, who was 15 or 16 years old at the time. So this was 2017, 2018. And the two of them start talking in Thai. And he asks her, so where do you live? And doxes her. This is a live podcast. And doxes my location in Thai. And that was very upsetting to me. And then at one point I don't know if it was the same call or a different call. I think we only did one of them together with him. But he starts, to me, the big thing that came out of left field was he starts, now keep in mind, at the time, he had over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, right? He had worked for Rand Paul's father, Ron Paul's campaign or something like that, or some other guy's campaign, right? But, that was kind of his legacy, and he was quoted after the Vegas shooting, I guess, in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or somewhere. Was quoted big, and people cited some of his stuff in some way. And so when he starts accusing me of being a CIA operation, and then the next thing you know, he says, so putai daimai, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
This guy speaks Thai, and he's like, putai daimai, Ging Kao Leo, Ging Kao Mai. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So he spoke fluent Thai.
Like scary good.
Fluent Thai. Yeah. And I had been living there for 6 years or whatever it was already. And
here's what's interesting, John. Here's what's interesting. People are going to get an authentic taste of that. See, I'm sure you remember in a general sense. I mean, obviously, I remember the trip. But when you sit here and watch us going through and having the conversation and the details that you cover and the questions that I ask and the things that are revealed through the conversation, people's minds are going to be blown, particularly about this whole business with Jake. And by the way, everybody now has this perspective of time that I don't know why this happens, but just I guess the accumulation of everything that we know since then, you're going to pick up a lot of details from watching this sponsor exclusive documentary that's coming up in about 15 minutes, because I didn't remember some of the things that we spoke about, and people are going to learn things tonight about Jake, about you, about the Las Vegas shooting. I think you're going to pick up on things that you did. For instance, you were talking about how the New York Times, you initially contacted them and they had published a story that you refer to as the timeline of Vegas. But what's interesting is it's actually, they called it examining Vegas like pixel by pixel or something. And it's like, wait a minute now, that is like super duper John Cullen-ish or counter John Cullen-ish of them to be calling it that, because that's what you were doing on the 5K thing, zooming in and finding all these dots. So people are going to learn things. Even people who've been watching us for 7 years, I learned things from putting this video together. So even if people aren't sponsoring right now, I really recommend that people get on there and go to subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, where even if you just subscribe for free, you can still access a lot of these legacy videos, including the one where Jake makes a complete ass out of himself here. And I really encourage people to join on Odyssey. Odyssey's got a decentralized platform coming that's going to further protect free speech. So it's going to be an exciting show, John.
Well, and for those of you who've been supporting me, so a big part of the reason also that I'm going to be taking off the disguise here on YouTube tonight before we go to the Patreon only, because I don't want to tease that out too far. But a big part of the reason is let's put it this way. I was doing my taxes recently using, what's that thing called? TurboTax. And when you get to the end, you answer a lot of questions. They ask you all these weird questions. I answer all the questions. I get to the end, and the thing, when it, it finally calculates and checks and double checks.
But you used the wrong thumbnail.
No, I wanted people to know that we're going to go to Thailand. So, I'm checking everything. Where was I? What was I talking about before you talked about the thumbnail?
TurboTax.
In the middle of, TurboTax. So I'm doing my taxes and I hit the thing and I'm at the end and I go to the thing, and when I go to submit the final thing, it came back with a wah, wah, wah. And it said, really, dude, you're cool. Meaning I made so little money. The government's like, you're fine. You're fine. We don't need your money. So one of the things I'm hoping tonight is that by getting rid of this disguise, people who were reluctant to support the work,
right,
will say, you know what, this guy's pretty legit, and he gave up the clown suit. So, and the funny thing is, I want you to do me a favor. Can you go online? There was like a Discovery Channel show, a reality TV show about people who make these masks for Hollywood. And one of our followers said, it would be really cool if you went out and got one of those latex realistic Hollywood masks and wore one of those, so that when you took off the thing, it wasn't real to you. And then you took that off and people would freak out. So I looked into it, and the masks were like $700. And I was like, that's a fun gag, but for $700, I can't afford to do something like that. But it would have been very cool. So can you find those realistic Hollywood masks that are really scary and $700 and show that to the audience?
I have a feeling they look better on the internet than in real life. There's no doubt that this could be done. I think I've mentioned to people that when I was on Amazing Spider-Man, the guy who was in charge of the special effects makeup division was an Academy Award-winning artist named Bill, Corso, Bill Corso. And he had shown me some pictures. There's a lot of standing around that you do on these billion-dollar movies waiting for the next setup. And it's great. You make a lot of friends and you get to kind of, shoot the breeze. But Bill Corso is, he's in demand around the world at all of these events for special effects makeup people. And he showed me this thing that he had done. He's married to a beautiful woman, and this is her done up as an old lady. But what he had done at the special effects makeup event is that he disguised his beautiful wife as a creepy old man and was walking around the disguised old man was walking around this special effects makeup artists convention, just freaking everybody out. And then at the end of the thing, when Bill Corso gave his speech about, what's up with awesome makeup effects, the old man came on stage and did exactly that, ripped off the face and showed that it was his wife. I mean, he had these pictures in his personal phone, so I'm not finding them here online. But somebody like that there's Heidi Klum. He did Heidi Klum for her Halloween party. So, I mean, he can do stuff where you could, sneak into whatever dressed as a very convincing.
If it wasn't $700, I was going to do that as a gag, but not.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to do that. But another big part of the reason is, again, the material that I've been presenting over the course of the last couple of years needs to be taken seriously. And when I watch what happens with Congress, with the Senate, they bring people in to testify. And I'm like, why are they bringing in people from Canada? There's nobody from the United States that you can bring in to talk about this that's really on top of this. So you're bringing in some Canadian chick to talk about the press and freedom of the press and the First Amendment. This is America. We don't need the Canadians to focus on the maple syrup. Stay focused on it.
And the Nazis.
Yeah, and whatever the hell you got to do up there. So, right. So, as I said on the last show, last week we did a show with a real John Cullen stand-up. And the point was that this is being incognito was to protect me from getting killed by effectively the same guys that pulled off the Las Vegas shooting. So when we first went and started doing these podcasts together, which I guess was like October of 2019, the year that we returned, I was scared out of my mind. I was scared that I was going to be, identified and killed, right? Mm-hmm. And, a big part of that was the research that we also started doing when Phil Haney died. And we start learning about this infrastructure that's within the United States. Yeah. And when I first returned with you, I didn't share with you. So this is like the one thing that I never was real clear about, or I was deceptive about, was my location. For the first 2 years, I played it as if I was still in Thailand. I didn't tell people I was back in the States. And then on a 2-year anniversary of coming back, I think Laura Loomer came on and we did a show together, and I'm back in the States or whatever. And what's interesting is I didn't reveal that when I first spoke to Laura Ingraham.
Right.
So the first time I spoke to Laura Ingraham, everybody thought I was still in Thailand.
Including her.
Right. And if you're an American who's overseas, you are fair game for Langley. Did you know that?
Yeah.
If you're overseas, you're fair game, right? They're not allowed to do their stuff here in the States.
Contractors.
Well, that's all another story. But Langley proper is not allowed to engage Americans in the States. But if they think you're in Thailand, they'll chat you up for sure. And they thought, they thought I was in Thailand. So this is the weekend that I last spoke to Laura Ingraham. And when I did that, she didn't know what I looked like. She hadn't been following my Vegas stuff. We didn't have the cameras on Skype. We just used Skype audio like it was a phone call. And we were reviewing the footage of the Neo stuff. And the reason this weekend's also important is because April 27th, 2020, we all almost died in an extinction level event. Or a bunch of people almost died in an extinction level event. Maybe not all of us. But, if that thing had, hit some place, it would have been pretty bad. So a lot happened this weekend, both 5 years ago and 4 years ago. And so as we approached the anniversary, I started thinking this incognito thing is only really serving me, kinda, and is it really? In other words, if I'm working so hard to bring this information forward and it's not being taken seriously,
right?
Well, why is that? Well, we got to hear from Adam Curry. And Adam Curry, like the first qualifying thing he said was...
One guy, the main guy talking, is wearing a black hat and sunglasses.
All right. So you can imagine, right? You can imagine the guy's in a hat and sunglasses. And so, at some point you have to get introspective and look at yourself in the mirror and say, And that's why I wanted to ask you about those masks. What if everything we did in the last 4 or 5 years together, I did in one of those masks? One of those horror masks
with the terrible acne problem right now.
With the big teeth and all that stuff. And it'd be like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the data was identical. What if the data was identical, but I was wearing one of those clown masks, you know, those scary looking white clown masks with the crazy, pull one of those up just to show everybody what those crazy looking scary Hollywood clown masks with the big teeth and everything. And these are the $700 masks. I mean, these are expensive and they look good and they're scary as hell. And if I had there you go, that kind of crap. So you can buy these masks for a couple $100 or whatever. They look scary. What if I wore that, but everything else was identical? I showed the maps, Hong Kong, right? There's not 10 people dead in Hong Kong, and I'm presenting all the same exact material, right? Bird flu. We're looking at the comorbidities.
Nobody would pay attention with this.
Right. And so what I had to do was realize that this is on the continuum of that. In other words, okay, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's.
But this is a little nuts, right? So enough so that Adam Curry says the guy's in a hat and glasses, and so it's very difficult.
He even went on to say that that's the reason he's not wanting to watch the video. He was very
that's explicit. That's the point. And so if that has been what's holding me back and holding this information back, holding us back, it seems like maybe it's worn out its usefulness, in particular because Maite bin Abdullah is in prison. Mohammed bin Nayef is in prison, right? I think MBS kind of on my team, right? I think we're kind of birds of a feather somewhat, right? So in that vein, I think, in other words, all these doctors on Twitter, it's like I understand them ignoring me with this, but they've been ignoring Amy, and the stuff that we're discovering is just too monumental to not be taken seriously.
Yeah. And, you know, I agree with you that it's a good decision to drop the disguise. I agree with you that your very serious information has not been taken seriously. I agree with you that it's a good next step in testing why that's happening to take off the disguise. But I do not think this is going to make people pay attention to the information. And what's interesting is you talk about that in the documentary 5 years ago that people are going to see in just a few minutes. We're just about out of time here. And as soon as we leave this YouTube show where you're about to reveal, go ahead. People are going to be able to join us on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth for a super compelling hour and 45-minute documentary where we go through all of this stuff. John, let's have it. There he is. Will the real John Cullen please stand up? Or stay seated. We don't want to lose you in this shot. But there you are in all of your bald-headed glory. Somebody commented they didn't realize your head was so large and round. I said you need that to contain the gigantic brain. So there you go.
But again, thank you guys for the support. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So join us, everybody. You're going to be watching a documentary travelogue rolled into one. This was shot 5 years ago on location when I went to see John in Koh Samui, Thailand. Tune in if you're not yet sponsoring on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen or patreon.com/IamJohnCullen or any of the Crowdsource the Truth sponsorship channels. Please join us. John has a lot of new potential female fans in the chat here, so that's good. This could open a whole new chapter in your life, John. Stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back. You don't want to miss this documentary. Thanks for tuning in.